Hey, my name is Tim Buell. I'm a drummer who lives in Nashville, Tennessee. Along with touring and session work that I normally do, I also transcribe a lot of drums, and I've transcribed drum parts, drum solos for brands like Vic Firth, the Percussive Art Society, Zildjian, and I've also worked with drummers like Aaron Sterling, Ash Sohn, Aaron Spears on transcription books of their drumming. So what I want to do in part one of this series today is just get us up and running with drum set notation so that we can write some basic drum set notation in Finale. Be sure to check the description box below for timestamps of all the stuff we're going to talk about today so that if you want to, you can jump around this video and use those to get to the topics that you want to hear about. So step number one is, you might have guessed it, opening up Finale. So this is what Finale looks like when it's opened up. You can do a lot of things from this screen, but what we're going to do today is we're going to Ctrl Shift N and we're going to pull up the setup wizard. And within this setup wizard, what we're going to do is we want to get our drum set notation started. We need to tell Finale that we want to make a drum set part. Today, I'm not going to be doing a score where the drum set will be a part of a larger ensemble. I'm just going to be making a drum set part. So what we can do is we can create a new ensemble. We can come down here to General and go to the handwritten style jazz font. This is going to be a drum set part. I want the notation to look a little bit more modern and a little more handwritten than something maybe you would see more in formal classical stuff. So we're going to go to next. And here is where we're going to find our drum set because we've picked kind of the style we want the sheet music to look in, but we haven't told it what instruments we want. So I'm going to go down here to drums. And I'm going to find drum set. I'm going to add that to the score. And then I'm going to hit next. And here's where we can populate titles and subtitles and arrangers and all of that stuff. All of these things are information you can change later. But I'm going to go ahead and type in drum set notation. I'm going to say the composer is me, Tim Buell. And sure, let's do copyright 2022. The rest of it we don't need. I'm going to go to next. And here, for us today, really all we're going to do is we're going to leave everything alone because we're going to be in 4/4 time. That's good. We don't need to worry about the key signature. We're going to have a percussion clef, so that's kind of irrelevant. And then the only other thing we're going to do here is we're going to specify the initial tempo marking. So we're going to make this a 90 BPM quarter note. And for the text, we're going to do something like I'm driving rock groove. This is going to be a driving rock groove today, I guess. Now that we have all that there, we're going to hit finish. And we have something that looks a lot like drum set music, which is good. So the first thing you should do when you set up, you get to this, you finally picked all your settings, everything's there. The first thing you should do is save. So we're going to name this drum set video. I'm going to hit save. So now this is saved. I can come back to it if I need to, get out of it now and come back to it later. And also I'll have auto saves that start saving. The first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of some of this text that's floating around that we don't need. So I'm going to go up here to the T. This is my text tool. I'm going to select that. I'm going to click this little square around the arranger and hit delete or backspace and get rid of that. I'm going to delete the subtitle. I'm going to delete the score. I'm going to get rid of all of that. And then looking at this score kind of right now, I actually don't need the drum set right here. And I don't need the DS down here, which stands for drum set. That would be useful if this were on, kind of a compiled score and all the parts were on each page. But for our purposes, we don't really need that. We're going to hit Ctrl K. So this brings up our score manager. And what we're going to do is we're going to go down to full name. And instead of drum set, we're just going to backspace it. We're going to get rid of it. And same down here with the abbreviated name, we're going to go to drum set, delete it, don't need it. So that's looking a lot cleaner. It's looking a lot more cleared up and stuff. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to change our margins because right now we have this kind of gap right here. So we're going to go up to the page layout tool and I'm going to take this handle and drag it over so that these first row of measures lines up with all the others. And then I'm even going to take it a step further. I'm going to right click on this very top one here and hit edit margins. And I'm going to change this margin to 0.5 like the rest of them, and I'm going to mark that on all pages and hit apply. By default, Finale formats the margins of pages so that if you were reading kind of in a score and you were having to turn left to right and things like that, it would kind of lay out nicely. We don't really need that, so we're not going to worry about it. And we're just going to format it so that all the margins are the same on every page. The very last thing I'm going to do to get set up is I'm going to go to the measure tool up here, and I'm going to hit Ctrl A to highlight all of our measures. And I'm going to change how many measures are locked on per line. And to do that, I'm going to hit Ctrl M with all the measures highlighted. This brings out the lock layout width, and I'm going to say 3 measures. That'll feel kind of nice. That'll give us a little more breathing room as we're trying to read these drum grooves. So now that everything is cleaned up, it's formatted like we want, we're going to go ahead and we're actually going to input some notes. To do that, I actually prefer using the simple entry tool. A lot of people that use Finale a bunch use the speedy entry tool. That's most effective with MIDI. And I've always found that for drum set, the speedy entry is just not my favorite. I like the simple entry because it allows me to put drum notation in the way that I think of it. What I mean by that is I'm going to click on the simple entry tool, which is right here. So now I kind of have this gray floating head that I can kind of move around. And if I use the arrow keys, I can arrow up and down to different notes. If I hit the left or right arrow key, I can jump by measures. And then if I want to place a note, I can actually, I'm going to go up to the hi-hats. We're going to put 8th note hi-hats here. I can scroll up. I'm on 8th note. If you want to change the subdivision that you're selected on, if you want 16th notes, you can either press the button over here, or you can hit the number 3. If you're on a laptop, it'll be the number 3 up at the top. If you're on a computer, a desktop that has a numeric pad, it'll be 3 on the numeric pad. If you want 8th notes, you hit 4. If you want quarter notes, you can hit 5. So I want to put 8th notes on the hi-hats. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to hit enter. So now we have 8th notes on the hi-hat for that measure. Before we go any further, I want to make a couple more tweaks to how the drum notation looks, because for me, I prefer to have drum notation. There's kind of 2 different approaches. You can do it where kind of the cymbals are all stems up and the kind of foot kick drum and hi-hat stepped foot stuff is stems down. I'm actually going to do this all in one layer, and I'm going to do it all stems frozen up. To make that change, what we need to do is go to Ctrl Alt A, and we're going to go to layers, and with the layer 1 selected, that's the layer that we want to edit. What we're going to do is we're going to make sure that it says it's checked freeze stems and ties, and it's selected to freeze them up. That'll make sure that our stems are frozen up, which is kind of the way that most drummers would be used to looking at sheet music. And what we're going to do is we're going to untick this apply adjustments only if the notes are in layers, because that's, sometimes you're just going to be playing hi-hat, and in those moments, I personally still want the notation to have the stems facing up. So if we hit apply to that, we can now see that if I go to my expression tool, I can kind of move this text up a little bit out of the way. But we can now see that we have our stems facing up. They're frozen up now, which that's a good thing. Another edit that I actually want to make is I prefer in drum set notation for kind of every beat to look like itself. So I actually want to ungroup these 8th notes and just have the 8th notes that are involved with one beat together. So I could do that manually by going to where I want to break the beam, and I could hit the kind of the question mark or the backslash button, and that's going to, when I hit that backslash button, that's going to break the beam where it is. But there's actually a way that you can change that for everything, which is what I want to do, because I don't want to have to manually do that for every single measure. So I can go back to Ctrl Alt A, which gets us to our document options. I'm going to go to beams, and I'm going to go to beam 4th, 8th notes together in common time. I'm going to unmark that box so that, each beat will be represented by itself and it's not going to be related to any other beat. And the other thing that I'm going to do is I like that all the drum set notation has a flat beam. It's a little tidier and makes it a little easier to read. So I'm going to go to flatten all beams, and I'm going to hit apply. Then I'm going to hit OK. So now that I have my hi-hats placed, I'm actually going to place the kick drum notes that I want. I'm still selected on 8th notes using the number 4, and I'm going to put a kick down here, a snare here, a kick here, and a kick here, and a snare there. And that's the first measure. And I actually want the second measure to look exactly like that. So what I'm going to do for that is I'm going to go up to the measure tool, and instead of rewriting all of this, I'm just going to copy this measure over to the second one. So I'm going to go to the measure tool, click on this measure so that it's selected, hit Ctrl C, select the measure where I want to place it, hit Ctrl V, go to this expression tool again and get rid of this text. And now I have my second measure, just like that. It's beautiful. I love it. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create another measure that's a little different than what we have. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to add some ghost notes to this groove. And I'm going to add an open hi-hat. So let's say we have, the first beat will be like this. On the and of 2 and the and of 4, I want an open hi-hat though. So I'm going to go, right now I'm just hitting the arrow up to get to hi-hat open, hitting that. So as you can see, in this measure, I just put in a bunch of hi-hats that were both closed and open, but they all look the same. And traditionally what you would do for open hi-hats, which again, I said the and of 2 and the and of 4 are where I want my open hi-hats. Traditionally, drum set notation for an open hi-hat marking has a little circle around it, and then where you want the performer to close the hi-hat, you have a little plus sign. That's a lot of extra clicking when you're making this, and in some of the transcriptions I've done that are huge drum solos with 30-second notes flying around, I don't want to place those little O's and plus marks everywhere. So what I like to do is I actually like to change my percussion layout so that I have a symbol that symbolizes an open hi-hat that's different than the plain X. So I'm actually going to change my percussion layout right now. And to do that, I can go to Ctrl K. That brings up my score manager. And I'm going to go down here to notation style. It's set on percussion. I'm going to, right next to that, I'm going to go to settings. It's selected on drum set because that's what we're working with. And I'm going to go down to edit. And here is the percussion layout designer where I can change note heads, what they look like, and all of that stuff. So I'm going to go down here, and for my hi-hat open, as you can see here, it says right now the closed note head is just a regular X. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to change it to a big X so that it looks like the rest of them. So now anytime I put an open hi-hat, it will have a note head that is an X with a circle around it, which will signify an open hi-hat. So that's great. The other thing that I want to tweak right now is I prefer that, we have a ride cymbal that we can play with the tip of the stick on kind of the bow of the cymbal. But then we also have the ride cymbal bell. In the regular percussion layout in Finale, they have the ride cymbal, which is an X, and then the ride bell, which is also just an X. So what I want to do while I'm in here is we've already changed the open hi-hat symbol. I'm going to change the ride bell symbol to something I like a little more, and that I think represents a ride cymbal bell. So it'll still be on the same line the ride cymbal is, but it'll have a different symbol notifying the performer that they need to play a ride cymbal bell. So what we're going to do for the closed note head on the ride bell is we're going to go here, and we're going to find symbol 84, which is kind of a, diamond shape. And I'm going to hit OK. We've changed our open hi-hat, and now you can see where we put the open hi-hats earlier. There's an open hi-hat right here and an open hi-hat right here. It's still right where the hi-hat usually is. It just has a different symbol telling whoever's performing to play an open hi-hat. So now I'm going to go back to the simple entry tool, and I'm going to place a couple of kicks and snares. But I'm also going to place some ghost notes. And ghost notes are something that, I'm actually going to place one on the of beat 2. So I'm going to go over to I'm going to hit 3 on my number pad, which will get me over to 16th notes. I'm going to click on this 8th note to make it a 16th note. And then I'm going to click right in between that hi-hat and this hi-hat and put a ghost note right there. So now I have a kind of ghost note that's filling in between that open hi-hat and the closed hi-hat on beat 3. I'm going to add I'm still in 16th notes. I'm going to add a kick drum to go with that hi-hat right there. I'm going to add 2 kick drums on the and of beat 3. And then I'm going to go back. I'm going to hit number 4. I'm going to go back to snare drum, and I'm going to hit a backbeat on beat 4. And now what I want to do is I want to copy that measure, and I'm going to put a little fill on beats 3 and 4 of this measure because we're going to change to the ride cymbal after measure 4. So we're going to go snare, 3 and then up here is the rack tom, down here is the floor tom, 4 E and Then we're gonna go up to the measure, right click this measure, go to bar line and put a double bar line because that signifies kind of a section change. And we're gonna go to the next measure. But before I do that, this isn't something that's always super common, but when I'm transcribing drums, I sometimes like to include stickings for the drummer to make their life easier. You know, sometimes there's a really intricate fill that I think works best if you play a certain sticking for it. So if you ever want to include stickings in your drum transcriptions or drum notation, the tool I like to do for that is the lyric tool. That's this tool right here. If you click that, you can click underneath a note. I'm gonna put caps lock on and hit right, left, right, left. So now that's a fill. It's in there. The reason I use the lyric tool is because no matter where I move this notation, I can move it over here. The lyric is going to carry with it, which is really, really nice. And before I move on, I'm gonna go back up to the lyric tool and I'm gonna go over to this arrow here. Here's where you can change how close or how far away the lyrics are to the line. And I'm going to the bottom of the staff and I'm gonna scooch these up a little bit. I'm using this third arrow because that controls kind of overall that first line there. You can do just this line, just this system. You can change with the second arrow, but I'm using the third arrow. So you'll want to use that third arrow if you want to make a global change. So that gets that sticking in there. So now we're moving on to the next measure. We're going to do some ride cymbal. We're going to do a crash cymbal. It's going to be great. So I'm going back to the simple tool. I'm going to hit number 4 so that I'm on 8th notes again. Get a crash cymbal going. And after I place a note, by the way, you can use the up and down arrow to change what kind of what symbol you want it to be. And then I'm going to go to the ride cymbal. But I think actually I want to make the off beats the ride bell. And because we changed that earlier, we can see that the ride bell looks nice and neat as that diamond. We can tell a difference between regular ride cymbal and the diamond. And I'm actually going to place some kick drum notes. If you'll notice, right now the backbeat is on beat 3. That means that this groove is kind of going to be felt in half time. So we're kind of doing an offbeat 1 and 2 and on the ride cymbal with the bell, and the snare drum is now on the backbeat on beat 3, which is going to make this feel halftime. So I want to give the performer a heads up. Hey, this groove is kind of like a halftime feel. And when I want to add a note like that, you could use the text tool, double click, halftime feel. But the problem is if you ever need to make a change in the arrangement, let's say that we need to take this measure and insert it before this kind of text didn't move with this measure, which is not good. We don't like that. We don't want that. We want to make sure that whatever text we put, whatever stickings we put, we want to try our best to keep that with wherever it needs to go in the score. I'm going to use the expression tool for this. So you can click the expression tool, double click where you want to place it, and now I have the expression tool. Let's go down to the expressive text, and I'm going to duplicate this just so I can use kind of the font that's included and everything, but I don't delete the original. And I'm going to go to edit, and I'm going to say half time feel. Hit OK, assign. And now we have a nice little note that no matter where I move this measure, we have that note that carries with it. I'm going to copy and paste this. Delete this note. Now that this is the second measure of the groove, I actually don't want a crash cymbal here. I'm going to move it down to the ride cymbal. And I did that by just clicking above it and deleting whatever note I just created. And that highlights me on the note directly below whatever I deleted. And I can move this up and down wherever I want. So we have this ride cymbal groove. Maybe we'll do another one of these, but we'll add some ghost notes in here. So now we have that. And then we'll copy and paste this measure. And we're going to do a final fill. And then we'll be out of here. So and I'm going to write the stickings in for this final fill. So So as you can see, the lyrics right here added a line. This is for if you're writing proper lyrics. For me, I'm not writing lyrics, I'm writing stickings. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go Ctrl Alt A. Here in the document options, I'm gonna go to syllables with word extensions and just kind of uncheck all of this. Use smart sections. I'm gonna do never. I'm gonna go to word extensions and go use smart word extensions. I'm just gonna turn all this off. Now we can see that little hyphen is gone because we've turned all of that off. Great. Before we get out of here, we're going to make a drum notation legend, which can be really helpful. But before you do, where this kind of ends, let's say that I kind of don't like how it ends with all these measures kind of hanging over. Let's say I just want to have that downbeat there. A way that you can kind of get rid of these extra measures and kind of make it a little neater and nicer is you can go to your time signature tool and select the last measure. Go down to 1-4 because we only have one crash symbol there. You can hide this time signature by going to measure, double clicking the measure, going down here to time and go to always hide. And now that is looking great. I'm still in the measure. I right clicked it and I'm gonna go to final. And now that looks very neat, very smart. It's just kind of one note. So now let's design a drum legend. A drum notation legend is something that can be really useful. There's no real standardized drum notation legend. Everybody does it slightly differently. There are a lot of best practices. There are a lot of really common things you'll see, but drum notation is still a little strange because they have their own preferences. And as you can see here, we changed the standard open hi-hat symbol. We changed the standard ride cymbal bell symbol. So with those Notehead changes, sometimes you really need to add a drum set notation legend, or maybe, the drum set has a really particular, maybe it's a stack of cymbals that's a particular thing and you want to add a drum set notation legend so that you can kind of tell people, these are all the Noteheads you're going to encounter, and this is exactly what I want you to play when you play them. So how we're going to do that is I'm actually going to go to the very last measure of our piece right now, and I'm going to go to the time signature tool. I'm going to double click this very last measure and I'm going to make this a measure of 15-4. You have to do this at the end of your document because if you don't, it'll change the time signature for everything and it'll be strange. So go to the very last measure of your document, make this a 15-4 measure. When you have the measure tool selected, select that measure, hit Ctrl C, and then we're going to go all the way to the very beginning of our document, select the first measure, and I'm going to hit Ctrl I. And what that does is it pastes the measure I have copied in front of whatever measure I'm selected on. So now you can see that 15-4 measure is the first thing. I'm going to go down here and relock all of those. I'm going to now go to all of these and delete what we have. And now we have our drum set notation here that we did that looks beautiful. And then I have this weird 15-4 measure. So it's not going to stay like that for long. Don't worry. We're going to put every single note head that is represented in our transcription, in our drum set part, we're going to put it all in this legend. So I'm going to go to the simple entry tool. I'm going to make sure I'm selected on quarter notes. So I'm going to hit the number 5 on my keyboard. And I'm just going to type in every symbol that we used. We used the kick drum, we used the snare drum, we used the snare ghost note, we used the high tom, we used the low tom, the floor tom. And then we used the hi-hat. We did the closed hi-hat, we did the open hi-hat, we did the ride cymbal, we did the ride bell, and we did the crash cymbal. And I think that's everything. I see that the measure I created, I just did that so I had enough room to put all those note heads in one measure. You can see that I have 5 extra beats in this measure. I don't need that. So I can go to my time signature tool, double click that measure, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We need a bar of 10-4, it turns out. I can hit OK. And now you can see this measure looks beautiful. It's got all those note heads in it. What I don't like is that there's a 10-4 at the beginning of it. That's a little confusing. There's a 4-4 over here. So I'm going to go to the measure tool. I'm going to double click this measure. I'm going to go down here to the time signature tool and I'm going to go to always hide it. And I'm going to click this box that says hide cautionary clefs. Now both of those are gone. Still in my measure tool, I'm going to right click, go to the bar line and give this a solid bar line. So now that's looking very neat and tidy. Now put text and tell people which note is what. And to do that, I'm gonna use the expression tool. I'm gonna double click this first, and I'm gonna go down here and go to edit categories, and I'm going to duplicate the expressive category and put drum notation legend, hit OK, hit OK. I'm gonna go to the expressive text. I'm gonna duplicate this and move it to drum notation legend. That's just so that the text that we're using for all the expressions has a uniform feel. I'm gonna edit this and I'm gonna put kick drum, hit OK, duplicate snare. So now I've gone through, and in this drum notation legend category, I've created all the drum notation text we need. I'm going to double click this, get that placed, click each note and put the corresponding text that I need. That's great. So now the final two things I want to do with this is I want to add a title for this. So I'm still going to use the expression tool for that. Duplicate this at drum notation legend. And I'm going to highlight all of that. And I'm going to uncheck this, and I'm actually going to make this size 18 font. That works well. And I'm actually going to go back and edit it. I'm going to go to positioning here, and I'm going to position it center. That way it's nice, and the handle for it moving it around is nice and centered. Now the final thing I want to do is put a box around this so that it's very crisp and clear and exactly everybody knows that this is a contained thing, not a part of the rest of the notation. So I'm going to double click here. I'm going to duplicate, edit. I'm going to delete this. I'm going to go down here to shape. I'm going to go to create, find the rectangle and just draw whatever. Doesn't matter because we're going to edit it. So now I have this box. I can move the box, and if I double click its handle, it'll pop up a bunch of handles all around the whole shape. I can kind of place it exactly where I want. Then I can scooch this down a bit. And now we have a beautiful drum notation part that looks great. It's got a nice drum legend. It's got everything that we need. It looks just super pro. It looks very crisp, very neat. And if you want to export this to PDF, that would be the easiest way that you can send this to the performer that needs it or whatever. You can go to Ctrl P for print. You can go to setup here. Make sure that you select Adobe PDF, hit OK, hit OK. Tell it where you want to save. And now you have a nice, neat PDF that you can send to whoever's going to be performing this. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully that answers your questions. If you have other questions, you want to see videos about certain things with drum set percussion notation in Finale, please let me know. Put down in the comments anything that you want to hear that maybe wasn't answered in this video, and we'll see you in the next one. Thanks so much.